a city rising by the sea, if that's bright, proud, filled with schools, hospitals, and grand libraries that seemed to promise a better future for everyone. People spoke the name Sassoon with admiration, calling them the Rothschilds of the East. They were the builders of Mumbai, the generous benefactors who gave so much back to society. But behind every shining building was a shadow, a truth that few dared to speak aloud, because the money that built those hospitals came from the same hands that shipped opium into China. Millions of lives were broken, families torn apart, entire generations addicted, all so that one family and one empire could grow richer. It's strange, isn't it? How something that looks noble can be born from something so dark. I've seen the same paradox in modern business too. Companies donating millions to charity while quietly exploiting people behind the scenes. And it always makes me wonder, at what point does success stop being success and start becoming a burden? As someone who spent years studying finance and startups, I've learned this. Money can buy reputation, but not redemption. We can build hospitals, fund schools, or donate fortunes, but if the foundation of our wealth is pain, no amount of generosity can erase it. The story of the Sassoon family isn't just about the past, it's a mirror, one that asks each of us, what are we really building our lives on? When David Sassoon arrived in Bombay, he wasn't the richest man in town. He didn't have armies, he didn't have titles. But he had something far more powerful: timing and connection. He understood that in business, capital is just fuel. But knowing when and where to light the match is what creates an empire. He came at a moment when Bombay was just starting to open its ports to the world. The British Empire was expanding, hungry for trade, and David saw the way before anyone else did. While others were busy protecting what they already had, he was building bridges with governors, merchants, and even rivals. He knew that relationships could open doors money never could. I've seen the same truth play out in today's startup world. Some founders think the biggest seed round wins the race, but it's rarely about who raises more money. It's about who aligns with the right ecosystem, who reads the flow of change and positions themselves at its crossroads. That's what David did. He stood right where trade, politics, and opportunity met, and the current carried him to unimaginable heights. Maybe that's something worth asking ourselves. Are we trying to push against the tide, or are we learning to catch it at the right moment? Because in the end, success isn't just about working harder, it's about seeing further. And that's exactly what made David Sassoon not just wealthy, but legendary. You see, the Sassoons understood something far ahead of their time: that people remember kindness longer than they remember corruption. So they built schools, hospitals, libraries, places where their names would live forever in gratitude. And it worked. The public saw generosity, not guilt. They saw the elegant buildings, not the shattered families in China whose pain had paid for every brick. It was the 19th century's version of what we now call brand washing. You've seen it too. Corporations today pledging to make the world better, while behind closed doors they exploit data, attention, or even human exhaustion. Different century, same playbook. The Sassoon's opium was a narcotic. Ours is dopamine, the addiction to clicks, to screens, to endless engagement that quietly fills someone else's pocket. I've watched many modern founders fall into the same trap. They donate a fraction of their profit and call it purpose. But purpose isn't what you spend money on. It's how you make it. And until we face that truth, we're just repeating history in a cleaner suit. So next time you see a company that boasts about changing the world, ask yourself, is it compassion or just clever marketing? Because as the Sassoons proved long ago, reputation can be built overnight, but integrity takes a lifetime. Success has a strange way of testing people. At first it demands courage, vision, sacrifice. But once you've made it, it starts whispering a different tune. One of comfort, pride, and the illusion that the game will never end. That's what happened to the Sassoons. The empire that once rose from discipline began to rot from indulgence. After David Sassoon's death, the family split into two camps, David Sassoon and Company and E.D. Sassoon and Company. Cousins turned into competitors. Meetings turned into battles. And while they fought over who deserved more, the world around them quietly changed. The younger generation didn't want to build factories, they wanted to host parties. They didn't want to lead, they wanted to inherit. The company became less of a legacy and more of an ATM that printed comfort. And comfort, as every entrepreneur eventually learns, is the slowest kind of death. I've seen this before. Startups that rise fast, then collapse not because of failure, but because of success handled poorly. No outside enemy took the Sassoons down. It wasn't the market or competition or even politics. It was ego. It was greed. It was the belief that they were untouchable. And maybe that's the quiet warning for all of us. Sometimes, the real danger isn't losing everything. It's forgetting what made us build in the first place. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Success doesn't always come from invention. Sometimes it comes from seeing the hunger before anyone else does. David Sassoon didn't create opium. He didn't even need to. He simply recognized that both Britain and China were trapped in the same cycle of need. One desperate to sell, the other desperate to consume. And he stepped right in between them. That's where fortunes are made. In the gap between desire and dependency. Think about it. Every era has its own kind of opium. In the 1800s, it was the real drug. Today, it might be attention, convenience, or validation. Social platforms sell connection, fast food chains sell comfort, apps sell control over chaos. None of it is truly new, and it's just the modern version of feeding a timeless craving. As someone who's worked with startups for years, I've met founders obsessed with building something revolutionary. But most markets don't reward revolution. They reward understanding human weakness. If you can see what people can't live without, like even when it's bad for them, you hold the key to power. The question is, what do you do with that power? The Sassoons used it to dominate a world in pain. They saw demand, they met it, and they became gods of trade. But every empire built on desperation eventually faces the same reckoning. When the need disappears, so does the throne. As the Sassoon fortune expanded across continents, their empire began to look invincible. They owned ships that crossed oceans, banks that moved gold, and mansions that glittered under London's fog. They even married into the Rothschilds, sealing their place among Europe's elite. A family of exiles who had now become nobles. On paper, they had everything: power, prestige, and proximity to the throne. But inside, something started to crack. The more British they became, the more they tried to erase where they came from. The family who once prayed in synagogues in Baghdad now hosted lavish dinners in English manners, pretending to be something they weren't. It's a story I've seen countless times. Founders who lose their identity trying to fit into someone else's world. They change their accents, their values, their stories, all to be accepted by a crowd that never truly welcomes them. Some of the Sassoon descendants later admitted their shame. They called their fortune dirty money from the East. They built castles, but couldn't escape the reflection in their mirrors. Because no matter how much wealth you earn, you can't buy belonging, and that's the irony of their empire. They conquered markets, but lost themselves. They bought status, but never earned peace. Maybe that's the ultimate reminder for all of us chasing success, that luxury might impress the world, but integrity is the only currency that holds its value forever. David Sassoon wasn't a genius inventor. He was a master of leverage. He understood a truth that still defines the business world today. You don't need to build the machine if you can plug yourself into one that's already running. He looked at the British Empire and its shipping routes, legal systems, and global trade networks, and realized he didn't need to fight it. He could use it. While others resisted colonial power, Sassoon turned it into an amplifier. Every British conquest opened a new port for him. Every war expanded his market. He didn't build an empire, he hitched a ride on one. That's what I call empire leverage. And in today's world, it's not all that different. Founders now do it with Amazon's logistics, Apple's App Store, YouTube's algorithm, or TikTok's audience. We're all surfing waves built by giants, and if you catch the right one, it can take you farther than any small boat ever could. But there's a hidden danger in that comfort. Because when the empire shifts, when policies change, platforms collapse, or governments intervene, your entire foundation moves with it. You stop being a builder and become a dependent. So here's the real question for anyone chasing success. Are you creating something that stands on its own, or are you just renting momentum from someone else's empire? Because leverage can lift you to greatness. But if you don't know when to let go, it can also drag you under. When Victor Sassoon shifted the empire's heart to Shanghai, it felt like a rebirth. He saw what few others could, that Shanghai was becoming the financial pulse of Asia. Skyscrapers were rising, jazz spilled from nightclubs, and money flowed through the city like a river at high tide. Victor rode that current perfectly. By the 1930s, he was the real estate king of Shanghai, owning luxury hotels, office towers, and entire city blocks. If you measured success in square footage, he had conquered the world. But history has a way of humbling even the boldest visionaries. When China changed its course and nationalized private assets after 1949, the entire Sassoon fortune vanished, almost overnight. Decades of expansion, billions in today's dollars gone with the stroke of a government decree. It wasn't mismanagement or laziness or bad business. It was simply the world shifting faster than he could pivot. And that's the part most entrepreneurs forget. Growth is seductive. It makes you feel unstoppable. But scale without adaptability is just a taller building waiting for a stronger wind. I've seen companies crumble not because they failed to grow, but because they couldn't imagine a world where the rules changed. Victor Sassoon built an empire of glass, beautiful, reflective, and fragile. And when the storm came, it didn't matter how high his tower stood, because those who don't bend, break. The story of the Sassoons may feel distant, another relic from the 1800s. But if you look closely, you'll see their shadow stretching right into our century. Back then, the most valuable commodity was opium. Today, it's data, and just like the empires of old modern giants trade in addiction, only now it's not chemical, it's digital. Instead of pipes and powders, we have feeds and notifications. Instead of ships crossing the ocean, we have servers humming in the dark, carrying your habits, your attention, your life, all sold to the highest bidder. The Sassoons built an empire by exploiting human weakness, and today some of the world's largest corporations do the same, only more efficiently, more quietly, and with far better marketing. They say it's innovation, but really it's dependency dressed as progress. As someone who spent years inside the world of finance and startups, I've learned that every boom hides its moral cost. Every metric, engagement, retention, revenue, is just a polite way of measuring addiction. We don't call it that, of course, because it's more profitable to look away. The Sassoon Empire fell when its greed outpaced its ethics. Ours might fall for the same reason, not from war or famine, but from forgetting what makes us human. And that's the irony of progress. The tools change, the empires evolve, but the lesson stays the same. When profit becomes God, people become collateral. The Sassoons weren't just a historical case study, they're a mirror for modern founders. They proved that financial genius without ethics only creates temporary empires. Eventually, the market and history always demand justice.